Well, it's just another day with the Arkansas State Police where they take it upon themselves to endanger everybody on the roadway by deciding that they are the sole arbiters of when a person is supposed to stop their vehicle, and they will punish with deadly force anyone who doesn't immediately bend the knee and bow and kiss the ring of the thin blue line lords. Let's talk about it. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. So you might recall about a month ago, I did a video about a rookie Arkansas trooper who pitted the wrong vehicle. A tactical vehicle intervention is what they renamed the move to because, everybody got tired of hearing about how many times the Arkansas troopers pitted vehicles. So we went through that case. They fired that trooper because he was on probation. But in this particular case, it's a little bit different. What we have is a gentleman whose son has had an allergic reaction to something. We don't know what. They've administered an EpiPen, and they are driving their child to the hospital. As parents, they've decided that waiting for an ambulance in Little Rock, where ostensibly there would be an ambulance arriving fairly quickly, would take too long, and that their child's situation was so emergent that they needed to put them in a private vehicle and take them to the hospital, okay? En route, they are doing 75 miles per hour in a 60 mile per hour zone when Arkansas State Police Trooper Amber Cass attempts to conduct a traffic stop. So here's what happens. They're doing 75. They slow down. You can watch the vehicle's patrol speed slow down. They turn on their emergency lights, and the wife is in the front passenger seat of the vehicle on the phone with 911, attempting to communicate what the issue is. It's obvious they are not trying to get away. But let's watch the news story so we can see how this shaped up, and then we'll come back and talk about a few things on the other side.
Dashcam video from Arkansas State Police shows an SUV going about 75 in a 60 mile per hour zone on Interstate 630 just after 8:30 that morning. A state trooper turns on her lights and sirens. The SUV flips on its hazard lights but keeps driving. The driver slows down to around 50 miles an hour but doesn't pull over. That's when the trooper uses a pit maneuver, hitting the back corner of the SUV to spin it to a stop.
Show me your hands! Hands up!
My son got an EpiPen.
You gotta stop! You can't keep driving!
My son needs to go to hospital.
Get out of the car!
My wife's on the phone with 911.
Get on the Keep your hands right there. Stand up. Stand up.
The driver tells the trooper his son was in the back seat having an allergic reaction. The child had just used an EpiPen, and the boy's mother was on the phone with 911. The father is then handcuffed, placed in the patrol car, and scolded by the trooper.
Could have gotten you there a lot quicker and then had to do all of this. All you had to do is pull over. Close to the hospital, too. I could have pulled over and helped you get up there quicker. Now you've got a felony charge. Turn around, sit down, slide in.
The trooper calls for an ambulance that transports the child to a hospital. She later drives the father there as well and allows him to go inside. State police defend the trooper's actions, insisting she did not know there was a medical emergency happening inside the SUV. Despite the trooper's threat, the Pulaski County prosecutor dropped the felony fleeing charge the driver was facing. State Police Director Colonel Mike Hager says that was the right call. No one was hurt in the incident.
What you guys might not know is that much of my audience skews above 55, like a substantial portion of it, over 50%. And that means that people are either dealing with or on the on-ramp to dealing with Medicare. And guys, what goes on in Medicare is wild. There are thousands of Medicare plans out there, and a lot of what people see and read is flat out misleading. Even the Medicare.gov provider directory has had documented errors. And then you've got commission hungry Medicare agents who are only pushing the plans that pay them the most, not necessarily the ones that are best for you. It's a mess. And the wrong decision can literally cost you thousands of dollars. I want to help y'all cut through the noise, which is why I'm telling you about the sponsor of today's video, Chapter. They're the only national Medicare advisor that compares and recommends every plan. They give objective advice, which helps them save people an average of $1,100 a year on healthcare costs. These guys won't push you to buy a plan that you don't want, and their support, I know it sounds unbelievable, is completely free. If you're anywhere close to 65, or maybe you are on disability and you have Medicare, or you're on the on-ramp to getting Medicare and you have questions about Medicare coverage, don't guess and do not settle. Call Chapter at 424-389 2979 or go to askchapter.com/Southern. They'll help you understand your enrollment options, and they'll use their expertise to try to help you save on your health care in ways that will actually benefit you. So again, the number is 424-389-2979. Give Chapter a call today. Okay, so first thing we need to do is look at the Arkansas Code 554-125, which is fleeing. If a person knows that his or her immediate arrest or detention is being attempted by a duly authorized law enforcement officer, it is the lawful duty of the person to refrain from fleeing either on foot or by means of any vehicle or conveyance. Fleeing means of any vehicle or conveyance is considered a Class A misdemeanor. And then under subsection 2, fleeing by means of any vehicle or conveyance is considered a Class D felony if the person operated the vehicle or conveyance in excess of the posted speed limit. And then it escalates up if it's operated in a manner that creates a substantial danger of death or serious injury to another person. Now, on its face, that code would seem to apply to this situation, but I want to draw your attention to Arkansas Code 52604, which is called the choice of evils defense. Now, this is a little bit nuanced, and I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but this is an affirmative defense that a person could offer when they're being prosecuted for this exact thing in a situation where there is truly a medical emergency like what we have here. So let's take a look at that code. Justification is subchapter 6, and that lays out the justification defenses in Arkansas, and 52604 touches on what they call choice of evils. And it says, under subsection A, conduct that would otherwise constitute an offense is justifiable when, 1, the conduct is necessary as an emergency measure to avoid an imminent public or private injury, and, so it's conjunctive, meaning both elements have to be present, according to ordinary standards of reasonableness, the desirability and urgency of avoiding the imminent public or private injury outweigh the injury sought to be prevented by the law prescribing the conduct. Now, here's why I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole. A necessity defense in most states is an affirmative defense. And what that means, again, we're not going to get too far into the weeds on it, but generally the burden is on the state to prove each element of the offense beyond a reasonable doubt. When a person offers an affirmative defense, in other words, this is not a, I didn't do this. This is a, I did this, but I had a justification. The burden then shifts to that person, the defendant, to prove the justification under the law. So instead of the state having to prove that he did all these things, because again, when we look at the code for fleeing under Arkansas law, it would appear that all of these things line up. Probable cause exists. And so the important thing to keep in mind as it relates to an affirmative defense is it does not negate the original probable cause that would have been the basis for the arrest. So if I'm defending this trooper, what I'm saying is, okay, fine, maybe after we get you charged and we introduce you to the criminal justice system in Arkansas and we start trying you for this case, then you can bring in some evidence that suggests that you were justified. But what we're looking at on this channel and where we generally talk about constitutional law is we talk about whether or not there was probable cause to make the arrest to begin with. So I want to just say, just from Jump Street, I don't think it's arguable that probable cause did not exist for the officer to make the arrest. So from a Fourth Amendment standpoint, as far as the PC of it, that's, I think, accepted, right? You're being stopped. You should probably pull over and explain the situation. But again, I'm doing the exact same thing as this guy if it's my kid in the car. Because you got to remember, they already undertook the calculus as this child's parents. If we wait 12 minutes, he may die. Okay, so they have decided to assume the risk that they might encounter a situation just like this one. So the argument about whether or not it's a completely stupid thing for the Arkansas State Police to continue to do after multiple situations like this one here, one is too many. One pregnant lady rushing to the hospital emergently because she's concerned about her pregnancy, having her head resting against the ceiling of her vehicle because the Arkansas State Police pitted her at such a high speed that she flipped the vehicle. That's enough. It should have never happened again. And remember that back when this lawsuit got settled, the whole idea was we're going to force these people to have policy changes. And the policy changes were supposed to introduce Arkansas troopers to what's called the objective standard, and it harkens back to objective reasonableness. So this migrates us from just a lawful basis for an arrest claim, right? We don't necessarily have an unlawful arrest or an arrest lacking probable cause under the Fourth Amendment. What we have here is a reasonableness of force applied under the circumstances, okay? So this shifts from a Fourth Amendment violation for false arrest to a Fourth Amendment violation on excessive force grounds. And the issue is, again, we may ultimately come to a place, if this person were to be charged and the district attorney decided to go through with the trial, we would probably come to a place ultimately where the jury believed that the affirmative defense was appropriate and they get a not guilty verdict. But that does not mean that the officer who made the original arrest lacked probable cause to make the arrest. Remember, proof beyond a reasonable doubt takes in much more evidence and accounts for everything that happened all of the way through till the case is handed to the jury. And then we determine at the end of this whether the state has met its burden or whether the defendant met his burden in explaining that there was a medical necessity. Okay, that's a completely different analysis. And I don't think that under the circumstances, it could be argued that there wasn't probable cause to make the arrest for fleeing at the time. Here's the issue. I want to draw your attention to something. This is mostly a public policy argument, but I just want to say that this trooper pitted this vehicle at 50 miles per hour. She initiated the pit maneuver, or the tactical vehicle intervention, bullshit term that they decided to put out there so people would think they're doing something different. They're not. They're still being reckless with your children and your loved ones, but they just call it something cutesy so you'll feel better about it. But they do this. They make this maneuver at 50 miles per hour, okay? It's generally accepted that at 50 miles per hour, anything really above 25 to 35 miles per hour, there's a higher degree of risk associated with flipping this car over or causing some catastrophic loss. That means that it moves us into the area where we're talking about deadly force, because it increases the risk that there's going to be serious bodily injury or death. And in order to justify that, you're going to have the standard that you would have to have if you decided to pull a gun on somebody. Keep in mind that fleeing under the circumstances as presented, this person slowed down their speed. We're not talking about felony. They reduced their speed to under the speed limit. By the time they get pitted, they're going under the speed limit. This is a misdemeanor. This is not justification for jumping out, pointing your gun, show me your hands. Like, this is a misdemeanor now. This is not a felony. And so this trooper stops this vehicle forcefully, okay, I would argue applying deadly force to a situation where deadly force is not justified. And so the Fourth Amendment violation here really turns on the notion that this was an application of deadly force, no different than pulling out your gun and shooting somebody. It's just that there wasn't serious bodily injury or death. And so it's really not any different than saying, well, I shot at this person and I didn't ultimately hit them. That doesn't mean that you weren't wrong for using your gun in the first place, right? The use of force is analyzed at the moment the force is applied. Just because you missed doesn't mean that you didn't need the justification to use deadly force at the time that you drew your weapon and shot somebody. And using a police cruiser to implement a pit maneuver at 50 miles per hour is, I would argue, an application of deadly force and unjustified here. It was obvious that, one, we're in a streamlined row of traffic. The person has reduced their speed. Their wife is on the phone explaining to 911 that they're rushing their child to the emergency room. I want to show you something. I pulled up the coordinates. You can see it on the dash cam here. So the coordinates where this pit maneuver happened puts us right here. And you can see this sign that says Central High School National Historic Site. This is exit 28, right? This is where the pit maneuver happens. So I want you to observe what we have here. We have 3 lanes of traffic at standard width. That's about 12 feet. So this is about 4 to 5 feet here of shoulder on the inside by the concrete barrier and 4 or 5 feet of shoulder on the outside here where this guardrail is, okay? So at most, you're dealing with 45 to 50 feet across this entire span of highway. And I want to flip this around and show you what the view from the back looks like. This was in December of 2023 when this Google image was captured. And as you can see, any vehicles approaching the area here would kind of be looking like this right here. They would be barreling down at 60 miles an hour, assuming they're all doing the speed limit, okay? And they would have to confront the fact that this Arkansas trooper is now taking up the entire roadway, because as this vehicle turns and puts its bumper against this inside barrier here, this is a Jeep Grand Cherokee. You're talking about 16 to 18 feet in overall length, okay? So that, assume it's 17, that puts us at 17 feet. So we got essentially this entire shoulder taken up and this first lane taken up by this one vehicle. And then in addition to that, you've got the trooper's charger that's going to be bumper to bumper. That's going to be another 17 feet. So that's going to take up the second lane of 12 feet and move 5 feet minimum, assuming they're bumper to bumper, into this other 12 feet. And so that means that anybody who can't stop is forced to take evasive action with the last basically 4 to 6 feet of the lane and 4 feet over here. It's barely enough for a vehicle to get by. And that ignores the fact that it takes a second and a half for a person to react to what they see in front of them. And if they're traveling at 60 miles per hour, that means that they're traveling 88 feet per second. And so we're looking at about 125 feet from the time the person recognizes that this trooper is stopped in the middle of the road. And these vehicles are now perpendicular, okay? This is literally an impromptu roadblock that gets set up with traffic traveling at it at 60 miles per hour minimum, trying to adjust and no way to get around. So this trooper has now turned herself and this vehicle with these people that are trying to get their kid to the hospital and subjected everybody in the car to a T-bone and the trooper herself. Now she's doing a felony traffic stop for a misdemeanor with traffic barreling down on her at 60 miles per hour outside of the vehicle's protections. And she's subjected this child who's dying of anaphylactic shock, potentially, to being T-boned on top of it. And this is the worst part of all. I want to show you where this happened, and then I want to show you something else. So look here, this is where it happened. This is the children's hospital. Now, the trooper makes her comments. You're even close to the hospital. I could have provided you an escort. Yes, everything about your conduct in this particular incident has led me to believe that if I had just explained everything to you, you would have responded appropriately and just escorted me to the hospital. How am I supposed to latch onto that as a taxpayer in Arkansas when the reality is that you stopped me from taking my child another 4/10 of a mile over to the hospital, and then I had to wait. Look at the timestamp when the ambulance arrives. The pit maneuver happens at 8:30. The ambulance arrives from inside the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. It takes them 11 minutes to get there with law enforcement saying, hey, we've got an emergency. I need somebody here to respond to this child. Maybe, I don't know, that might be the reason that they decided to take the child themselves instead of waiting on EMS to try to get there, okay? So you've delayed this emergency situation by 11 minutes. Within that time frame, the child could have died. And then ultimately, we see this 4/10 of a mile to Arkansas Children's Hospital from where this pit maneuver happened. And so what we're left with is the undeniable reality that this is all about ego. This is all about, you will understand as a citizen of Arkansas that the state police and the police state and the law enforcement institution is the arbiter of whatever emergency you think exists. You must come to us and get our permission to have an emergency. If we decide that that's not important enough, we get the sole arbitration authority. That is the undeniable reality of what we are seeing here. Because obviously, this policy change that they advocated for in this lawsuit made zero difference. We could very easily be dealing with a dead trooper, a dead family, a dead child, not because of anaphylactic shock because his parents couldn't get him there, and not because of anaphylactic shock because the ambulance didn't get there in time to get him there, but because a trooper decided that her emotions were more important than a parent's discretion or a parent's decision-making when it came to taking their child to the hospital. And despite the fact that there was nothing in the behavior of this person that endangered public safety, that rose to the level of a felony, they still pitted the vehicle, they still subjected this person to excessive, deadly force in the absence of any reasonable justification, and they nearly caused the death of multiple people, not including the public at large, that may have crashed into this person because they didn't know what to expect and couldn't react fast enough. That is what the Arkansas State Police thinks is appropriate under the circumstances. We went through the Arkansas State Police's statement before when we talked about this rookie trooper that did this pit maneuver on the wrong vehicle. And remember, I told you at that time that based on the news release, whoever wrote the press release acknowledged that Arkansas troopers had been pitting about 30% of the vehicles they were pursuing over the course of the time between 2016 and just a month ago when this happened. And they see no problem with that. They're bragging about it. This policy will ultimately end in the death of an innocent person because apparently the public is so confused about what law enforcement does and should be doing that they're okay with this type of thing. It's time to stop. It is time to stop. And in closing, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about the disjointed nature or the incongruence in the way that the public views the role of law enforcement and the way that law enforcement actually works, okay? And I need you to hear me if you're a citizen of Arkansas. We know that there's an incongruence because of what's going on with a local sheriff's election in Lonoke County, Arkansas. Now, I want to be clear about this. The people of Lonoke County have decided to vote in a person who's currently being charged with murder on the theory of vigilante justice. Now, I want to be clear about this. I'm not advocating for anybody charged with crimes against children. I would never take a case like that, okay? I'm not making that argument. You have to have something that you stand by on principle, or you have nothing. You have nothing except feelings that change based on who the players are, right? As I've mentioned before, the Constitution is the only true north that exists, okay? So you have to remember this. So apparently this guy was alerted to the fact that his daughter had been abused by this person in their 60s. It looks like the facts as they've come out have indicated that there may have been a little bit more of a consensual relationship than originally thought by this person. But this guy named Spencer found out that his daughter was with this person who was alleged to have abused him. And he went to where his daughter was. He found her. He ultimately got into a confrontation with this guy, and he shot and killed him. That's a separate issue, right? I'm not even talking about what I think about that. I'm not even rendering an opinion on that, because as a father, I might have different ideas about it than as a lawyer. But I want you to understand something. The people of Arkansas have voted out the sheriff who's been there. And I don't know whether that's a good sheriff or a bad sheriff, and I don't know why he got voted out. But they voted him out in favor of this person who has found that it was appropriate to take the law into his own hands. And all I'm saying about that is this. There's a dangerous situation happening in our country where a certain segment of the public believes that the police should be weaponized to go after people that they don't like, people who commit certain offenses. And it's not necessarily as serious as child crimes. It's theft. It's people that they don't like or want here in the country. Maybe they're here illegally, whatever. There's a certain section of, and it happens on both sides of the aisle, right? There's a certain section of the population that are okay with the police being weaponized that fits squarely within the lens of their political ideology or their worldview or whatever, okay? The problem with electing somebody as sheriff and understanding that he's going to lead the sheriff's department with that same mentality is that he may get by with it. The people in Arkansas may ultimately find him not guilty, and they may even use the same necessity defense that we just talked about, because he may have reasonably believed that his daughter was in serious danger, and he may have taken the law into his own hands, and he may have done so justifiably under the law. But that's an anecdotal, one-off situation, not dissimilar from the Cain Velasquez situation in Texas. It's a one-off situation where you might have jury nullification, and the jury may say, we're fine with this happening. But if you run a police department with that mentality, here's what's going to happen. The county is going to go bankrupt from lawsuits. Walking Tall was an awesome movie, but you can't run a county the way Buford Pusser ran a county. He ain't The Rock, and this is not a new forthcoming of vigilante justice behind the sheriff's department. What's going to ultimately happen is that county's going to go bankrupt because law enforcement officers are going to be encouraged to do things in a way that satisfy the emotions of people. And if you had the ability as a law enforcement officer to carry that all the way through to what the public saw as justice, you might even be able to make an argument that that's what we want. That's what they want. That's what whoever wants, right? But here's the issue that most people do not understand about law enforcement. They don't have the power to prosecute somebody. All their role is to be a reliable witness for the state and to introduce the person to the criminal justice system. They don't have any ethical duties that exist beyond that, or a law license attached to what they do with that case once they turn it over to the courts. But the judge does. The judge is bound ethically as to whether or not they can convict based on the law, not based on emotions that have been issued by the public and an agenda that's been issued by the public based on a vigilante mindset. The prosecutor can't proceed with a charge that they know is not going to hold up at the end of the day in a jury trial. So you've elected this guy to be your sheriff, hoping that he'll enforce the law the way he decided to enforce the law in his own life. And what's going to ultimately happen is you're going to get sued for all the constitutional violations that come out of it. And you're going to pay out of your taxpayer fund for that. And the end result is this person's not going to be able to be prosecuted because you can't kill them all. You're going to have to try some of them. And when they get into court and you realize that the law doesn't allow for this sort of law enforcement, the end result's going to be that the person ends up getting away with the thing that they did. And then your county's broke because you allowed a vigilante type sheriff to come in and run the county in a way that the public might think is great and makes them feel fuzzy, but ultimately is not lawful. So you have to divorce this sort of notion that the way you want things to work is the way it actually can work, because it can't. I'm not arguing that people who commit crimes against children don't deserve the most brutal justice. I'm not making any of those arguments. I'm just saying that there are very few situations like that. The vast majority of interactions that are going to be undertaken by this new sheriff and this new administration are going to be your run-of-the-mill stuff like this right here. And if you encourage them to go out and rights be damned and just deliver your version of justice, I hope you're ready to pay for it, because ultimately you will not get that conviction. That person will not get the jail time, and then you're going to be paying out of pocket for all of these things that were done unlawfully. So that's all I'm trying to say. The public will have to, at some point, become educated about the difference between what they expect law enforcement to be able to do and what law enforcement can actually do. Law enforcement, no matter how important they are, they have no actual authority for bonds, sentencing, whether a prosecution even goes forward. Clearly, because this prosecutor dismissed this charge against this person. So that means that despite the fact that Trooper Cass decided that it was her duty to risk the life of everybody on 630 that day, and this child who was on death's door, and these people who were driving, and her troopers who were backing her up, and her own, ultimately what happened is this case gets dismissed. She's going to get sued, and she's going to lose because she created more danger in the process of taking whatever action she did than existed by simply following the person 4/10 of a mile to the hospital. Anyway, that's my opinion on it, guys. I hope you got something from it. I'd like to invite you to check us out on all the socials. I'll put up a QR code here for you to scan with your phone. That'll take you to the Linktree site where you can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Substack. You can join on a paid tier of Substack if you want, but that's only for people who want to support the channel monetarily. I don't put anything on these platforms that people have to pay for. If you don't want to follow us to other platforms, but you'd like to support monetarily, I'll leave my Venmo and PayPal links both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel. Leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care. Always film your interactions with the police and keep your evidence to yourself.